Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, the channel where we go through the good and bad of everything nerdy to make sure you spend your time on the best of the best. In today's video, I'll be doing a review and how to play video on Die Hard, the Nakatomi Heist game. So let's get into it. So in this game, you take on the role of either John McClane or the band of thieves led by Hans Gruber. And if you play as John McClane, you're trying to take out the terrorist group that has taken over Nakatomi Plaza in a plot to crack the safe in order to get their hands on millions of dollars, as well as to rescue the hostages being held by the gang of thieves. But the other players will take on the gang of thieves led by Hans Gruber, try and crack the safe and get away safely while also trying to kill John McClane. And so while you're playing as John McClane, unfortunately, you're the only one that's able to take down these thieves in the building, and you're lacking all equipment and gear and weapons to take them on, so you need to survive by your stealth and wits and the little ammo you're able to find by taking out the thieves. And then on the flip side, as the thieves, you have to deal with the annoying John McClane that's sabotaging your attempts to crack the safe and code and get away scot-free with the millions of dollars. But first, let's jump into how you play the game so you have a better idea of what's going on, and then I'll jump into my full review after that.
All right, so now that we've got the game out, let's walk you through some of the basics on how to set up the game and how to play, and then we'll jump into my full review after that. So when you're setting up the game, you'll start off by setting up the first act of the game. And so the game itself is split into 3 different acts that you're going to play out various parts of the movie. And so this is the setup for Act 1, but you can also see how to set up the act in the rule book. So I'd recommend doing that. And then you'll have this on hand to set up Act 2 and 3 as well as you play. The instruction book also breaks down a little bit more on how the specific objectives function for both John McClane and the thieves as you play. We'll go through a general idea for you in this. And so you'll set up and randomize the various green tokens on the board in the locations that are described in the rulebook. You'll place thieves on each green space on the board, and then John McClane has a starting point. And then you'll also randomize the 1 symbol for the red symbols on the board for John McClane. As you set up the player deck for John McClane, this is actually pretty simple as well. I recommend setting up 1 pile for each act within the game. So you can tell what act the cards are based on which boxes have writing in them. So this is an Act 1 card because every box is full. The Act 2 cards will simply have box 2 and 3 full, and then Act 3 cards will just have writing in Act 3. So I recommend separating the cards in these piles because when you start off, you're just going to use the Act 1 pile and put that in John McClane's draw pile. You can then set Act 2 and 3 off to the side, as you'll simply use those when you get to that point. Also be sure to set up the objectives associated with the specific act on the board. For example, on the Thieves objective card, it says Act 1, and the same thing on John McClane's card, it'll say Act 1 on it. And then you just put them in the symbol describing that objective. You'll also want to take the Lock Progress card, place it on Lock 1, and then flip up the first 2 sections of the combination for the Thieves. And so Lock 1 says it has 2 cards, and this is how you would structure it, 1 card on top of the other. Now when it comes to playing the game, that's pretty simple as well. The John McClane player will simply deal themselves 5 cards, and that is their starting hand. And then the Thief player will actually depend on how many players are playing as the thieves for the game. So if you're in a 2-player game, it's different than a 3 and different than a 4. So for example, let's say we're in a 2-player game. Thieves will get 3 cards to form their initial hand. Then for their turn, they will start by playing 1 thief card face down. They will look at the next thief card that comes up, as this can influence what cards they'll play. And then they will play a card from their hand to go with the other cards in play. John McClane always goes first, and he will simply play one of the cards from his hand, and he'll just take actions in the various things listed on the card. So let's say, for example, he takes and plays this card. So he'll play this face down. Now he can move 4 spaces. You cannot move diagonally, but you can move outside of that. So I could do 4 spaces. So my goal in this case is to uncover the hidden objectives. So So I could do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then simply reveal what this is. So this is actually a bad token. You don't want to get this. So John is basically damaged in this sense, and you're going to have to discard the top card on your draw pile. So luck really wasn't on my side that time, but it's how it is. So now when it comes to the thieves' turn, they will reveal the cards, and now you arrange them in ascending order. So in this case, it'll be 3, 13, and then 17. Now at this point, what you'll do is you'll look at the white numbers on the outside 2 cards, and these are what you can use to start to unlock the combination on the lock. If these 2 numbers are adjacent to each other on the lock card, you can place 2 symbols signifying that you've unlocked that ask. So in this case, it's a 7 and a 3, so I could put them here since they are next to each other. Now, if it did happen to be a number where there wasn't 2 next to each other, you could simply just pick one of the 2 numbers. So let's say those were already covered, and this was the case of what I drew. I now have a 3 and a 7. Well, in this combination, there's only 1 7 available and no 3, so I would choose to put the unlock combo on the 7. The next part of the thieves' turn is to use the abilities listed on the card. So in this case, the ability is to move, punch for 3, or shoot for 4. So the numbers associated with the punch and shoot simply mean that you need to roll a 3 or higher, or a 4 or higher in this case, to be successful in that action. So let's say, for example, I'm going to move 3. I could do 1, 2, 3 as an example. Also, these grayed out symbols, you need to use 2 movement to be able to enter that area. So in this case, I could only do 1, 2, and since this would require 2 movements to get there, I couldn't actually get to that spot. So in this case, I might go 1, 2, 3 to unlock this and reveal this, and it happened to be nothing. So in Act 1, the thieves are searching for hostages, and so it could have been a hostage symbol in that case, but it wasn't. Now at this point, they're going to discard their hand, draw back up to 3 cards, and then the play will continue to John McClane. So in this case, I might do move 3, recover 1. So recover means that you'll take 1 from the discard pile and put it back in your hand, or again, whatever that recover number is, and then you'll move again at that point. So in this case, John is trying to reveal the red circles to find the machine gun. So I might go and try and do that again. So 1, 2, 3 for his movement. That's his turn. We'll again go to the thieves' turn. In a 2-player game, you would play the first card face down, the second card you would look at and then play face down, and the third card, you would play a card in your hand based on the one that you saw and that you could think you could get a combination in the play area. So I've got a few 9s on there, so I'm going to try and put a 9 and then see what happens. So we'd flip this up, got 3, 9, and 9. So 3 and 9s would now get a code, but there is no 3s, so I'd simply just use a 9 in that case. Now I would use the actions on the 9. I could move and punch for 3 in 2 scenarios. So in this case, I might move this guy here. Now I can punch, so I'll roll the die. That's a 4, so that's a successful hit because I needed 3 or above. Punching will work 1 space away from your character. Shooting must work in a line of sight, but they need to be at least 1 space away from you. So I would need my character to be here, for example, to hit John McClane. But again, this was a successful punch, so I'll add 1 to the damage tracker. John will need to discard a card, and then I could punch again because that was listed on my card. Another successful one. So we'll add another damage to John in this case. If I were to happen to fill up this meter, I would get to unlock 2 more locks, and then the damage would come off, and I would restart filling this again as I damage John McClane. So again, how the thief action works is a little bit different for 3 and 4 player games. So just consult the rulebook on how that works. This is the general idea of how that works. Another thing to understand is that when you get down to 2 cards, you'll have to discard them, draw a new hand of 5 for John McClane. And you'll continue play back and forth between thieves and John McClane until the act is over. All the objectives have been completed by John McClane, and he makes his way to the goal. Also note that if the thieves do happen to fully fill a card, they will then discard these, take the items off, move the lock to lock 2, and then flip up, in this case, 2 more cards to fulfill the next lock. And they will start working on unlocking that throughout the game. Once this first act is finished, you'll move on to Act 2, and you'll take all of the cards John McClane has played and add them to the Act 2 deck. And so now this becomes your play deck that you'll use in the next round. Any unplayed cards will just simply be placed off to the side of the game and no longer used for the rest of the game. Any accumulated damage will carry over to the next round for the thieves to continue building on. Same thing with the lock, whatever progress they have achieved will be carried over until the next act. And then as we've played, we just simply reshuffled the thief deck to form a brand new thief deck when we started the next acts as you play. You also just simply rearrange the board. It can be flipped around in different ways depending on what act you're on. And then you can just simply flip to Act 2 and go through the setup on how to do that in the rule book. It also explains the objectives and how those work in Act 2 as well. They're pretty self-explanatory as you go through the objectives. And if you've seen the Die Hard movie, it kind of follows the plot line of the movie as well. But if you have questions on this, feel free to drop a comment and it can help you out on this. Now the game can end in 3 different ways. If John McClane dies, which is basically he needs to draw more from the draw pile and it does not exist. So if you got down to the 2 cards, and you needed to draw 5 and there was no more draw pile left, he would be considered dead and John McClane would lose the game. If the thieves break into the vault, meaning they've solved all 6 lock combinations and then have activated the detonators on Act 3 before John McClane has won, the thieves will win. And the game also can end in Act 3 if John McClane kills Hans Gruber before the thieves have opened all the locks or killed John McClane. A few additional actions that have not been covered yet that the thieves and John McClane can do. One is that the thieves are able to sacrifice their entire card here in the middle and perform none of the actions listed to basically bring another thief back from the dead for reinforcements. So you can only bring up to the maximum number of thieves that were original to the setup of the specific act. So for example, in Act 1, there were 3 starting thieves. So at most, there can only be 3 thieves on the board at a time for this act. So if John McClane was successful in killing one of the thieves, and the thieves sacrificed their middle card to call for reinforcements, they could simply bring a new thief back on one of the unoccupied green squares. As far as John McClane goes, there's a couple different moves that they can do. So one is the shove move. And so in this case, you would need to roll a 2 or higher. And what this could do, if you are adjacent to a thief, you could push them in one of the directions adjacent to the thief. They cannot move diagonal though. Also after the first round, once you've recovered the radio, you can play the support move, and that will actually move the tracker up on the radio card. And depending on where the tracker is at, it will give you a bonus number to the die roll that you have. So in this case, if it was all the way full, you get a +2 to your die rolls. So if I rolled a 3, it would be actually like rolling a 5 for John McClane. So he's more likely to land specific attacks like shooting and punching when he performs them. Now, there's a couple other rules that you'll find in the rule book as you play. But again, if you have questions, feel free to drop a comment below. But now that you have a better idea on how to play the game, let's jump into my review.
Well, now that you know a bit on how to play the game, how do I actually feel about it? Well, I would first say that if you're a Die Hard fan, you're going to enjoy this game a lot. There's a lot of references of great lines from the movie. The artwork and imagery is great. And you really feel like you're playing as characters in the Die Hard movie. I also think the gameplay mechanics are good enough to hold up on their own. So if you're not necessarily a Die Hard fan, I still think you'd get enjoyment out of this game. And it might even spark your interest to go check out the Die Hard movies after playing this game as well. But with that being said, I do think that the game does a great job thematically as you're playing. Because when you play as John McClane, you certainly feel like you're outnumbered, you're undersupplied, and you have to do all you can to scramble and survive as you're trying to save the hostages. You have limited ammo, and you're often resorting to acting stealthily to get past the thieves or getting into fistfights and brawling your way out of the situation. You're also constantly getting your butt kicked by the thieves, and taking damage and losing cards as you play. I think it also does a great job immersing you in that experience where you're constantly trying to crack the code. When you first start cracking the code, it's pretty easy to make your way along, but as you get to the tail end of solving each code, it can be very frustrating where you keep drawing the wrong cards and you won't be able to get past it for a few rounds. And so I think that you get the same feeling as you would as the actual characters in the movie experiencing that. And all the while, you're trying to have to fend off John McClane and prevent him from achieving his objectives so you can be able to focus on cracking the locks and getting away with the money. And so I think it does a good job of immersing you in the experience no matter what side you play. And I think they do a good job of making both sides that you play actually fun. There's some games that I've played in the past where you play as either the good guys or the bad guys, and one is fun while the other isn't. And this game does a good job of actually having both sides be fun. Honestly, I kind of almost enjoyed being the bad guys a little bit more. I really enjoyed the puzzle aspect of trying to crack the safes and playing the cards in my hand to create the best way of unlocking the safes as you went. It was also kind of fun trying to figure out different ways that you could sabotage John to ultimately get away with the money. But playing as John was also a lot of fun too, getting to go around and take out the thieves and trying to defy all odds and come out the end a hero. Also, playing as John was fun because you had this unique kind of deck building mechanic in a sense where you had your base deck of cards, and then depending on what you played, you could carry forward with you between each act, and those cards would then become more powerful in the later acts. So it really mattered what you use in the first parts of the game because they would only get stronger the more you use them throughout the game. And so I like that aspect a lot, where your early decisions could influence how you fared in the later acts of the game. I also liked where the thieves aspect, you needed to balance what cards you played in a sense that you wanted to play the right cards to unlock more of the locks, but you also needed to play specific cards to be able to take advantage of the moves that were available on those cards. So if you needed to shoot in certain situations, you would have to play specific cards to do that, and you might need to sacrifice the locks you were unlocking to be able to have the right moves that you needed for the objectives you were trying to achieve. And so I think the different objectives that they throw into the game are a lot of fun too. They mimic what happens in the actual movie, and then just also add another level of strategy to the game as you're playing as well. Now for John, all of his objectives are mandatory. You need to do them in order to advance to the next act. But for the thieves, they do have objectives that you don't necessarily need to do. But if you choose to complete them, you get bonus locks unlocked as you play them. So again, that adds some randomness to it, as well as alters the strategy depending on the situation and what objectives you want to tackle first. You prioritize unlocking the locks, completing the objectives, or beating the crap out of John to try and cause him to die and win the game as the thieves. So there's a lot of different options and play styles you can go with when you play the game, and so I like that aspect of it. I also kind of liked as you were playing as the thieves that there was a little bit of an unknown aspect to it where you didn't necessarily get to see what the first card was. You got to check out what the second card was, and then you'd play a card on your hand based on what you've seen and what you hope to have happen. But it always didn't work in your favor or play out how you wanted it to, and so I liked that aspect as well. It was kind of another puzzle element to the game as you played as the villains. So I think there's a good amount of strategy in the game to balance out some of the randomness to it, which really made it a lot of fun to play. I think though it was a little bit hard to figure out the deck mechanic, at least reading the instructions, but once you jumped into actually playing the game, it started to become second nature very quickly. And while it looked like it would be a complex game that would take a long time, it actually only took about 20 minutes for each act that we played through. And so surprisingly, it only took about an hour each time we played through the game. So that was great, where you didn't have to sink in a lot of time to play and get the full experience of the game. And since again, it didn't take that long to play through the entire game, it left you wanting more or to try and win depending on what side you were on and if you won or lost the first time you played through. So while you can win with either side, I think the game was still a little bit skewed towards John McClane winning and kind of keeping the game true to how the story played out in the movie. But I'll also say it did seem rather balanced in a sense that when John did win, it was usually within one or two turns of the thieves being able to win as well. So it always usually ended up being close, where if the thieves would have gotten another turn, they would have won versus John. So I think if you played 100 games, maybe you're going to win 75 of them as John, but it's going to be a close win either way. So it doesn't necessarily feel like one side is overpowered compared to another. I'll also say that the replay value of this game is good because there is a lot of different strategy involved. How your decks play out every time is different. How the locks come up is different every time. So it's kind of a new puzzle each time you play, no matter what side you're on. But since you are just going through the same acts over and over again, it can get a little bit repetitive in that sense. But overall, I had a lot of fun playing this game. I'd recommend checking it out, especially if you're a diehard fan. It's like playing the movie, and you get to play as either side and still have a lot of fun. So I definitely recommend adding Die Hard, the Nakatomi Heist game, to your nerd library. If you'd like to pick up a copy, there'll be a link in the description below where you can do so. And if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button as it really helps out the channel. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. And if you'd like to help us support the channel, pick out content and more, become a patron of ours at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Patreon. And if you'd like to plug into our live streams and Let's Plays we do on the channel, you can follow us on Twitch at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Twitch. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.